Yo, what up everybody, it's Stewart. I would like to apologize for missing last week's Metagore Monday. It's been one hell of a past couple weeks, being sick, heart problems, all kinds of different stuff. So yeah, I'll make that up at some points, probably next month after, something like that. But anyways, today's video is about 56 different writing terms. I think maybe 2 months ago, something like that, I did a video about different acronyms and terms and stuff like that for writing, and today I'm going to be talking about other writing terms which aren't really acronyms. Some of them I might have mentioned in that video as an acronym, but today I'm going to be talking about more actually what the term is and stuff like that. So yeah, so I've kind of broken these down into 4 categories, I guess. Yeah, we'll see. The first one is your audience or your target audience. That is really who you're writing to, you know, the age group as well as the demographic. Yeah, I think I said that right. But you know, if it's like, you know, middle-aged males or, you know, whatever from the Midwest, whatever, your target audience, who your book is actually targeting. Within that, you also have like the age audience categories, which are children, which are, you know, little children, you know, picture books, stuff like that. You got middle grade, you have young adults, which is not a genre. I've seen so many people classify young adults as a genre. You know, what genre you write? Oh, young adult. It is not a fucking genre. Young adults is an audience. It is the target range of age. It's the target age range of your audience that you are aiming on, you know, selling your book to. That's who you feel will get the most enjoyment out of your writing. Not necessarily saying that's the only people that will read it, but that is who you are targeting. It is not a genre. And then you have adults as well. As with young adults, I hear people say, oh, I write adult as a genre. Or when people do say adult, they think erotica and stuff. Erotica is a genre. Adults is not. It is target audience. Erotica is going to be targeted towards adults, obviously, but it's not, you know, the same, vice versa. It's not the same. So yeah, get that straight. The next category is genre. I did not list that many because yeah, there's all kinds of genres, subgenres, and everything like that. But these are some of the more, I guess, out there genres that most people kind of know about and this and that, or are more familiar with, even if they don't read it. So you have fanfic or fan fiction, which is just writing something in someone else's world using a character that's already been developed by somebody else. You know, if you write a Harry Potter fanfic, it's using, you know, the Harry Potter characters, and that's Hogwarts and, you know, kind of that world that's already built for it, but you're writing your own story for it. You have speculative fiction, which this kind of encompasses a large sum of different types of genres. It's anything that you have to actually try to come up with stuff that doesn't really exist in the real world, or, you know, you think might have existed but you're not sure. Like you have to speculate whether or not it is or not actually something that existed. Which speculative fiction encompasses like science fiction books, fantasy, horror, some historical fiction, because you don't really know exactly what was back there. I mean, you can do some research and stuff, but there's some, you know, events and stuff that you're still kind of speculating on and such, as well as like steampunk and space opera and stuff like that. Stuff that is not really 100% proof that it's actually happened or it could happen and stuff. You know, you're kind of speculating on it, or you're just, you know, using your imagination to create that world or those events, or, you know, whatever. And then you have like westerns and romances, and like I mentioned a while ago, erotica, which is not necessarily adults, not always erotica. You know, erotica should probably always be adults. I don't know why it wouldn't be, because of the explicit content, but it doesn't mean that adult books are always erotica or anything like that. So yeah. The next is the book length, and this is more, how long, like word counts, what classifies a type of book to be a novel or not. So I just found a couple of examples. These word counts are not always accurate. It varies from genre to genre. It also kind of varies from publisher to publisher exactly what they classify as what type. So you'll just have to kind of check with them, just kind of make sure. The first one is a microfiction, which is generally less than 400 words. Then you have flash fiction, which is usually less than 1,000 words. I know a few people that do about like 2,000 or 1,500 or whatever for flash fiction, but the average, what's typically stated, I guess, is about 1,000 words or less. Then you have a short story, which is about 7,500 words. I've seen some that say about 10,000 or less, some that say 5,000 or less. So it's just kind of, like I said, it depends on exactly who you're submitting it to, exactly what their guidelines are, and what genre and stuff like that. Then you have a novelette, which is generally 17,500 words or less. Then you have a novella, which is usually 40,000 or less. Novels, I've always heard 80, around about 80,000. When I looked it up, it was showing about 90 would be, the go-to number, like 90 or less words for a novel. And then anything over 110,000 is generally classified as an epic. And most places don't want epics unless it's like fantasy or something like that. Then they're wanting that epic fantasy type ordeal. But generally, a lot of publishers won't really want an actual epic, especially not as a first-time book. But yeah. The next category, or it kind of goes along with that same category, dealing with book length, it's actual like series lengths. You can have just a one book, which is a standalone. If you have two, it is called a duology. Duology. Then you have three, it's a trilogy. You can have four. There's an actual word for it. I can't remember. It was like a quadrilogy, something. I don't know. But anything four or more, you can classify as a series. Usually, in technical terms, there's not a 2-book series or a 3-book series. A 2-book is a duology. A 3-book is a trilogy. 4 or more is actually classified as a series. And then you get to sagas and chronicles. And the difference between a saga and a chronicle versus like just a series is a series or any of those others are generally, it follows events in chronological order. This happens and then the next book is literally the sequel to that first one or that one before it and such. A saga and chronicle does not have to actually follow, a series of events like that, one right after the other. They actually follow a series of events, like whether it's a family or a personal history type ordeal or more of a social type history. So you can have like a series of books that's a chronicle if it's following like different characters. I know there's one chick I used to beta read for. Her books, each one follows a different character in a different part, but their stories all tie together. So that is a chronicle because it's not following the same people like right after the other. It's following different people, but it's kind of all connected together. Same thing with the Star Wars saga, even though those movies follow one after the other, if you look at it as a whole, you're following the family, you're following Anakin, and then you're following Luke, and now in the new series you're following, I don't remember what her name is, but you're following the family, so it's not just a, one character type ordeal you're following one character for a couple movies, and then another one for another, but as a whole it's still classified as a saga because it does switch from one character to another and it follows that family history in a sense. The next section is actually about, when it comes to writing your book and stuff like that. First couple are, are you a plotter? Do you sit down, do you outline, do you try to think of everything that, you're going to do for your story before you actually start writing it? Are you a pantser, where you just kind of sit down and start writing, no outline, no nothing, just kind of writing from the seat of your pants? Or are you a plantser, which is you outline a little bit and then you just kind of write from your pants a little bit, you know, kind of go back and forth. You know, and that varies from person to person, and some people it just kind of varies from story to story. It just depends how they feel that they want to write that particular story. And then you have draft 0, which a draft is, you know, what round of writing of that manuscript are you on. Typically your first draft is, you know, the first time you write it through. When you go back to your revisions, that's your second draft. You go back again, it's your third. You know, how many times have you went through it? So you would think a 0 draft would mean you haven't started. That's not necessarily the case. Some people that are plotters, when they write their outlines, they write thick outlines. They don't really classify it as an outline because it is so thick. I know I write outlines and I write them pretty thick. Whenever I started Sovereign Duties, my outline was like 13,000 words for my outline. So it's a very hefty outline. Stuff like that would be more of a draft 0. It's when you outline very thoroughly. It can almost be classified as a draft because you have all the key elements pretty well described and depicted in order like a draft. You just haven't really fleshed it out into sentence form in a sense. So that's what a draft 0 is. The next one is a working title. A lot of people have working titles. If they don't know what they want to name their book yet, they just kind of give it a certain title, especially if they have multiple works in progresses. So they know which document is what. They just kind of give it a title. Some people just put book 1, book 2, you know, project 1, project 2, whatever. But other people will name it like name of the character, the first sentence, something like that. You know, just something so they know exactly what story that is when they haven't came up with the actual title yet for it. The next couple are more about people that are reading a book. The first is an alpha reader. An alpha reader is someone who reads your book from the very beginning, basically, in your process of writing. Usually that very first draft, some people send off chapters to alpha readers as they write their first draft. So they would send off, you know, they write chapter 1, they would send off chapter 1 to that person while they're working on chapter 2. Whenever they got done with chapter 2, they'd send that off. Other people would do kind of like they do with betas. They'd wait until they get done with the first draft completely, and then they would send off the manuscript to their alphas to read it or whatever in its entirety instead of sending one at a time. For the Battle for Metagore, I sent off one at a time as I was writing it. For Sovereign Duties, I'm actually going to wait until I finish the first draft, which I hope to have done by the end of the year. And then I will start sending out alphas then. But an alpha reader is someone who reads it, the first draft, very raw, uncut, or whatever. Not edited, nothing, just how you wrote it the first time. And typically for alphas, you don't really want other writers as your alpha, or not that you don't want them. They don't have to be writers. You want more people that are within that target audience, that age range, that, you know, geography, whatever word, I can't even think today, whatever. You want people from that demographic. From that demographic, that age range, what are kind of read it. So you're getting feedback from, you know, a reader's eye. It's not necessarily a writer's eye, because writers are more, you know, oh, this needs to be edited, this needs to be punctuated, blah, blah. It's the first draft. It's not going to be perfect, you know. And if you do have writers, that's fine, because they will be able to help you pick up on some of that stuff so you can kind of edit it, you know, before you start your next revisions if you want or whatever. But they don't have to be. Your main focus with the alpha reader is to get feedback from a reader's perspective. You know, do they like how that story was kind of going? You know, some of the characters. What do you need to work on to make it better for your next couple of drafts? And then the next one is a beta reader. Basically the same thing as alpha readers, but by that point you've already kind of went through your first draft. You've done revisions. You've already kind of polished it pretty good. And then you send it to them, and then they will read it and tell you, you know, again, you know, from a reader's perspective, what they liked, what they didn't like, and what they think you might want to kind of change a little bit. So that's more later on in the process, and you could have multiple rounds of betas. The next one is a critique partner. A critique partner you could have from the very beginning. You could do it closer to the end, you know, around with your betas or something. But a critique partner is, like I said, for an alpha and beta, you want it more focused on that demographic of readers, your target audience, to give you more of a reader's perspective. A critique partner is more on the actual writing perspective. You know, what actually needs to be edited, what, you know, stuff like that. That's what a critique partner is. It is from the eyes and opinions of another writer. And typically with critique partners, it doesn't have to be the same genre. It doesn't have to be people that actually read it, because it's more focused on the actual art of writing and not necessarily the, you know, way it sounds, I guess. And a lot of times with critique partners, you know, it's a two-way relationship. They will critique your stuff, you will critique theirs, and, you know, you're kind of working back and forth with each other. And the next is an arc reviewer. An arc reviewer is, again, just a reader. It could be a writer, it doesn't have to be. It's just a reader. And by that point, you want it to already have been edited. You know, maybe not have it proofread. I know when I sent mine out, I had already done a proofread, but it doesn't have to be. And I've done proofreads after that and still had to change stuff. But an arc reviewer, they just get an advanced copy. You know, it's about as polished as it's going to get. You know, there might be a few proofreads, a few spelling errors or something like that you need to change, but the actual content of the story is not going to change any. And you send it to them just so they can read it before your book is released. That way that they can leave a review once the book is released. And that's the whole purpose of an arc review, is just try to get those reviews in, instead of just waiting forever for people to read your book or review it or whatever. Because more reviews you have on Amazon, better your, you know, page ranks and more people will actually see it and stuff like that. So if you can try to send out to a lot of arc reviewers, you know, not everybody's going to review it, but, you know, you could send it out to a lot of people, which means you have a higher chance of more people actually reading it and reviewing it. The next is your protagonist, which is just basically your main character, your, you know, hero of your story or whatever. And then you have the antagonist, which is typically the villain in the story. Which your antagonist does not always have to be in person. It could be, you know, a series of events. It could be, you know, the world around it or whatever. You know, if someone is struggling with, you know, debts or something, and they are, you know, trying to do different things to earn money or whatever, and that's what the story was about, you don't really have a bad guy in that scenario. But the antagonist would be, you know, debts and stuff like that. So it's whatever your protagonist is kind of fighting against to overcome, in a sense. The next, you have a prologue. Not every book has to have a prologue, and I would advise, if you don't know how to write a proper prologue, do not write it. Most authors that try to write prologues, especially self-published authors that don't really know the fundamentals of a prologue, it's basically either a first chapter that they just decided to name a prologue for whatever reason, or it is a info dump. It's not really a chapter, it's just a bunch of just random stuff. So, oh, this is all the stuff you're going to need to know before you read the book, instead of trying to sprinkle that in throughout the story. If you're going to do either of those, don't. If it's just going to be basically a first chapter, put it as a first chapter. You don't have to have a prologue. A prologue is something that kind of ties into the story a little bit, but it's not directly tied into the series of events, or if it is, it's from a different person's perspective that is not followed in the story as a whole. Like with the Battle for Metagore, originally I had wrote a prologue that was about an event that happened hundreds of years before the story, and eventually I just took it out because I didn't feel like it really served that much of a purpose for the story. It had a small purpose, but in the end I didn't really feel like it was necessary, so I went and removed it. But, you know, I am going to add a prologue into The Gift of a Child that I'm writing, because it is from a different character's perspective. You follow one character throughout the entire story, but this is an event that kind of sets the story in motion, but it's from a different person's perspective. So that story will have a prologue, but you know, it falls in that category of a prologue, what prologue should be. But as a prologue, as a first chapter, no, just name it as a first chapter. If it's just an info dump, no, you do not need an info dump. And that's why a lot of readers don't read prologues, because they feel like it's just an info dump and they feel like it's not really necessary. You want your readers to read your prologue. You know, you want it to add something to the story. Like they feel like they didn't read it, you know. Not necessarily they're missing out, because I feel like if it's tied in the story that heavily, it would be more of a first chapter. Unless it's, like I said, from a different character's perspective that you don't really follow. Like I said, in Gift of a Child, that event actually ties into, you know, that first chapter pretty heavily. It takes place the day before. And if you don't read it, then you'll just kind of feel like you just got left out on that event. I mean, you'll hear about what happened and this and that, about the story, but, you know, you're like, well, I wish I would have actually seen that event take place or read about it. It's there, it's in the prologue. It's just from a different person's perspective, because the main character is not even there at that point. The next is the epilogue, which is kind of like the prologue, except it's at the end. You don't want it to be just a last chapter, because it could just be a chapter. You don't want it to be, you know, a quick summary of what has happened, or, you know, oh, I'm going to make this a cliffhanger in this last chapter, and then I'm just going to kind of summarize what exactly, you know, happened in an epilogue. That's not what an epilogue is. It, again, is to kind of give insight on something that might not have necessarily been clarified because it really had nothing to do with the story. Or, you know, it could be, you know, this happens and then, you know, years later this happened. Like the Battle for Metagore. All of my Metagore books will have a epilogue. In the Battle for Metagore, I have one. It takes place during the course of time of the first book, but that character is no longer relevant or anything like that, so I didn't really want to put it into the story itself. But if I didn't put it in the second book, when that character is reintroduced, some things would just not make sense at all, and you'd feel like you're left out. So that's what that epilogue is. It's kind of there to tie book 1 and book 2 together for that character, in a sense, kind of knowing, you know, what's going on there. But it's not a last chapter, because the actual main plot of the story and everything else has already summarized, or it was already completed and all that stuff. Everything's all wrapped up. It's just this character that you hadn't seen for, you know, however long is in there, just to kind of, you know, this is what's going on with him, you know, kind of get you set up for book 2 with that character. And some people would have been like, if I had wrote the Battle for Metagore as a standalone, alright, the war has ended and this is who the Lord is. So that'd be the end of the book, the, you know, last chapter. They wrote an epilogue, you know, 10 years later, this is how, you know, the society's kind of been going through, you know, rebuilding phase, I guess, after the war, you know, kind of that aftermath. You kind of give a little bit of glimpse of that. That is also fine. It's not something that's necessarily directly tied into the series events. I mean, it is, but it's not like this is something I would need to know for the actual story itself. This is part of the main plot. It's not. An epilogue is, you know, something kind of set aside, just like the prologue should be. The next is your blurb. Some people call it a synopsis, which is wrong. A synopsis and a blurb is not the same thing. I see it interchanged all the time. People's like, yeah, send me, you know, the synopsis on the back of your book. Send me the synopsis. Your synopsis should not fit on the back of a book. Not unless it's like a children's book that's 5 pages long. A blurb is what's on your back of your book. A blurb is kind of that little summary, not really summary, but something kind of get your character or your readers engaged in your story to want to read it. That is a blurb. If it's a paperback, it's on the inside flap, whatever. That little kind of summarize, you know, what the book's about, you know, kind of engaging with the readers. That is your blurb. A synopsis is a breakdown of what actually takes place in the story in its entirety, of mostly the main plots. Some people will want the side plots as well. They don't want any kind of mystery. If you got this secret villain that's not revealed until the very end, or isn't revealed until book 2 or something, you still need to put that into your synopsis at the beginning. This is who it really is. A synopsis is what you send to literary agents or publishing houses or whatever, so they can just kind of read that over real fast to make sure you know how to tell a story in a sense, kind of compress it down, see what your story is actually about without actually reading it. They don't want to be in the dark of anything. They don't want you to try to hide anything, try to make it all, a mystery, like, oh no, this is supposed to be a big mystery, you're not supposed to find out until the end. It's not the purpose of a synopsis. They want to know that you know what you're doing. So that is typically a lot longer than a blurb. A blurb, they typically say, is about 150 words. Anything after that, most people will just kind of lose interest in reading. The average person will read a blurb and about 150 words in, just automatically just kind of, all right, yeah, they've already figured out what they want to figure out. A synopsis is usually a lot longer. Usually, I have wrote a synopsis for a couple times. One had to be 700 words, and another one had to be 500 or under. So it's longer than what a blurb will be, and it has to detail more, which was very hard for the Battle for Metagore, trying to write everything that takes place in that within 500 words. Eventually, what I went with was just doing the main plot and removing almost entirely all the little side plots that go on in that book. There were some, the fate of a couple of characters that are intertwined with the side plots. I kind of incorporate that in there, so that was known. But exactly what all was going on with that, no. But typically they want you to write about as much as you can about the book within that, so they know this is what happens. They know exactly what the book is about. There's no reason that they would have to read the book to find out anything. All that stuff should be spelled out within those words. And the book itself is just more, your actual prose and how you wrote it, in a sense, and your descriptions and stuff. You don't have to write any kind of descriptions or anything like that in your synopsis. The next is either trunking or shelving your project, which is when you're working on something and you just kind of not necessarily give up on it, like you're trashing it, throwing it away, but you're like, I'm done with it for now, I'm gonna work on something else. You get a new idea, or you're just struggling with it and I'm just gonna put it on hold for now and maybe try to work on something else, or just take a break from writing altogether. You're trunking your manuscript, because people used to have trunks and put their writing stuff in. Shelving it, put it on your bookshelf, putting it, whatever. Same thing. Next is a crutch word or a crutch phrase, also known as a pet word, pet phrase. It's something that you typically just, without even knowing, a lot of times that's your go-to word, that's your go-to phrase, and you might not notice it while you're writing, but when you have alpha readers or beta readers or critique partners or something, they will pick that up. A lot of people will say certain words just naturally all the time in their speech, and therefore it goes into their writing that same way, when most people wouldn't typically say that word, or not that much. It just gets repetitive, and it's just something that we automatically go to. I know somebody kind of looks confused. A lot of times I put their brow furrowed, or they got a perplexed look on their face, which is perfectly fine. But when you repeat that over and over and over, it gets very repetitive. You gotta have more broad variety of words to use, or ways to word the sentence where you don't have to actually use those wordings or whatever. And it's just something that people just naturally draw themselves to. It's just something that they naturally have in their vocabulary, so therefore they use it a lot. And that kind of goes into the next one, which is darlings. Something that you typically like. It doesn't have to be a character, it doesn't have to be a certain word, but just certain scenarios or certain events or certain whatever that you are typically drawn to, and you typically just put into your stuff without really knowing it at times. So other times you do, you're like, oh yeah, I like this scenario, boom. If you're writing romance and you like the love triangle or something, you're constantly putting that in there, which You know, if you want to, you can, but it still can be a hindrance on some people that want more of a variety, especially if it is done to the extreme, you know, you overdo it and such. And the next one is the term, I know Stephen King's famous for saying the quote, you know, kill your darlings. That's what he's basically talking about. He's not talking about kill your darlings like, you know, I do or George R.R. Martin does, you know, kill all your characters and stuff. It's, you know, take what you typically like to do and don't do it, you know, break that habit if you can, you know, do something and then change it drastically. You know, if you want to do a certain, like that love triangle, like I was mentioning, if you want to do that love triangle, you know, don't do it. Or if you do, put a twist where it's not really a love triangle. That one person is just there kind of helping the other two get together, without the other two really knowing. So it almost feels like a love triangle, but it's not, you know, something like that. You know, kind of step outside of your comfort zone, do something different, you know, broaden your horizon. The next is bunny trails. I forgot who I was, I think it was in one of my live write-in chat things or whatever, or somebody else's, I don't know. But I remember I was on camera, I believe, and somebody was talking about, I think it was on camera, I don't know. It was some live writing sprint. I don't know if I was on there or somebody else or whatever. But either way, mentioned bunny trails, and somebody's talking about what? I was like, yeah, you go, you know, chasing rabbits, you know, down bunny trails. I was like, oh, we always heard it as, you know, I think chasing squirrels, and somebody else said something about bird watching or something like that. It's all the same thing. I think different areas of the country might use different. I've always heard it as bunny trails, you know, following something down a bunny trail or a rabbit hole or something like that. But what it basically is you just kind of get lost on this little tangent or this little, you know, side plot or something, and you start kind of writing that, and then you realize, you know, you're so far off of what you initially was writing towards. You know, you start focusing on that side plot so much that you're not even following the main plot at all. So I feel that is more prone probably to pantsers or plantsers, that, you know, people that kind of rough through their pants because they don't really have a set direction as much. They are just kind of writing whatever, and you're more capable of just kind of trailing off to the side and following something else and be like, oh, this isn't what I was really wanting the book to be about. I wanted it to be about this. That was just going to be a side plot, but now that's taken up 30,000 words on my book. You know, that's over half of it or something. The next is a red herring. A red herring is something that you tell your readers that's not real. That's not true. Not real, because, you know, fantasy, not true. But something that's just not true for your story. Something that's not true for whatever. It is you lying to your reader on purpose, which might sound bad, but if you do it right, it makes a good mystery, I guess. When you lead your readers to believe something just for them to find out later that that's not what's going on. You know, you could have this character that is like, you know, the typical old hag looking woman or whatever, like a witch, always rah, 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 whatever. And you can kind of paint her as like the villain, and all this bad stuff's happening. These cats and dogs are getting killed, or kids are getting kidnapped, and this or whatever. And you could paint her as the villain without right out saying this is who the bad guy is. You know, you can paint it pretty well from your protagonist's point of view that that's who the bad guy is, and then come find out. It could be like the sweetest old lady, you know, she might just, you know, talk like that or might whatever, and she has nothing to do with all these horrible things that are going on, you know. It's like a misdirection type ordeal. That's what red herring is. It's you're purposely lying or, you know, misleading your reader to believe something just to later be like, nope, that's not what was going on. This is what's going on. But you have to know before. You can't just write something that's like, oh, I'm going to change it at the very end. You know, just, yeah, you know, that wasn't who it was. You need to kind of know at the beginning and maybe even kind of drop hints on some stuff. Or I guess you don't really have to drop hints. But it has to make sense after they realize that that's not it. When they go back and read it again, they could see, okay, yeah, I could see how it was this other person, you know? Not necessarily how it wasn't that person, but how it could be the other person. Like if you're having all this bad stuff happen, and it ends up being this one other character, if at some point when something bad had happened and the other character was with your main character, that's not plausible, because how could they be doing that if they's right there, you know? The next is prose. When someone's talking about prose, it's talking about the actual writing of the book, you know, the narrative, you know, your prose, the way you tell the story, you know, your actual writing style and such. The next is purple prose, which comes from the color itself, purple. Purple as a color is also known as royal blue. Royal blue because royalty would wear purple a lot of times, especially in ancient times or whatever. Purple was just seen as a royal color, and it was classified as a royal color because it was really flashy and it stands out a lot more than some other colors, which is where purple prose comes from, because it's more flashy type of prose. It's when you are kind of overwriting, you are writing too much stuff to make your story sound good. You are trying to be too poetic, or you're got too much of description, or you're just describing certain things too much. Then you have tropes. A trope is something that is generally, kind of like I was talking about darlings, something that you typically kind of go towards, you know, your pet word, pet peeve, or your pet word, your pet phrase, stuff you typically go for because it's just natural. A trope is something that, in a sense, is kind of natural because we are so ingrained with those love triangles, you know, the chosen one, all that kind of stuff. It's stuff that has been repetitively done and it's gotten a lot of praise, or some big, you know, name books have used that certain trope, so a lot of other people want to kind of mimic that, and like, well, you know, that book did really well and that's what this story was about, so I'm going to write a book kind of set up the same way, so maybe mine would do good. And not everybody has the same mentality or anything, but that's basically what a trope is. It is a certain event or category of events or category of storytelling that has had success in the past, and so people generally kind of write something towards that end. The next you have a story bible. A story bible is very good if you have a series or multiple series that's going to be taking place kind of in the same world or something. Even if you're just writing standalone, it can be very helpful. It is kind of like your outline in a sense, but for more like your world building and character building and such. Some people put their actual story outline in their Bible. Any kind of backstory you want, even though it's not going to be put down onto the page of your actual book, but something you might want to know later, or you know, might want to reference while you're writing. Write that down, put that in your Bible. If you have a maps or anything, character portraits, fan art, whatever, to kind of give a visual, you know, aesthetic boards people make on Instagram and Pinterest and such. Put that in there, you know, all the details of everything that you have for your book, anything that you've written for your book that's not necessarily pertaining to the actual story itself, you know, not your actual manuscript, but anything else you come up with will go into your story Bible. And I've seen people with like binders upon binders of something for a book, you know, a standalone book, and they would have like binders. A story Bible is just basically, you know, everything that you create for your story that isn't your manuscript itself will go in there. Just so you have something to kind of quick reference, you know, oh, this character, what color eyes do they have? Open up your Bible, flip to your characters, you know, all right, got blue eyes. You know, oh, I wanted some type of event happen at this point, but I can't remember what it was. You know, boom. Or, you know, this war is what shaped this, but I don't remember what year it was in. You flip through there, bam. It's just a quick reference for you. The next category or section or whatever is more based off of business end of things. One is your author brand. You know, what do you want to be known as? You know, your presence and this and that. Your author platform in a sense. Your platform is more social media. Your brand is kind of what you're spreading on your platform. I, as D.L. Stewart, will be a medieval fantasy author. That's my brand. Probably pretty gory at times. Very raw type of world, I guess. It's not all flowers and sunshines and rainbows and unicorns. There are some unicorns, but it's more medieval, darker, grim type stuff. That's just me. You think of Stephen King, you think of like horror and stuff like that. That's his brand. That's what he's kind of associated his name with, and that's what you should try to do. On your platforms and stuff. You want to associate your name with something, so people will hear your name and like, oh yeah, boom, he writes medieval fantasy. Oh yeah, he writes a lot of blood and gore, war stuff. Whatever. If you write romance, you want to really tie that in. Oh yeah, she writes romance. She writes kinky erotica. He does this. He does that. She does this. You want them to associate your name with what you actually do. You don't have to have something unique like, oh yeah, he writes fantasy. Oh yeah, he writes fantasy. It can be the same. You just want to make sure that they know what it is that you write. The next one is a pitch or an elevator pitch. I've heard that, maybe a 3-sentence description of exactly what happens in your book. So it is very condensed, 3 sentences. I couldn't tell you right now off the top of my head. I don't have a paper. I went to a workshop thing before, and it's basically how to write an elevator pitch. It was like 3 sentences. The first sentence should be about something. Second one should be about something. Third one should be about something. I think the first one is to kind of introduce your character. Second sentence should be something about more what's going on in the plot, and the third one should be, how your character is going to achieve or hope to achieve what's happening in the plot or something. I could be wrong on that. I don't know. But it's basically a quick pitch you can give somebody real fast. Oh, you're writing a book. What is it about? Bam. This is what it's about. The next is houses or publishing houses. A lot of people know as like the big 5. These top, publishing houses, Penguin and others like that. That's, if you get signed by one of them, they pick you up or your book up or whatever, oh yeah, that's going to be a lot of recognition, just because of who they are. But there are other, publishing houses, you got smaller sister type houses underneath them. That's not that main house, but it's still kind of associated with them. You've got indie houses that aren't associated with them at all. They're their own little independent ordeal. You've got, different stuff like that. You also have vanity presses, which do not go with the vanity press. I'll let you know that right now. All they want is your money. If you have to pay for anything through a publishing thing to get published, no. The next is an advance. Some smaller publishing houses and stuff won't do it, or they have a very low advance amount. Bigger houses will. They'll usually do a lot more, especially if you have multiple books out and you have already established yourself as an author, and they feel, really good about how well your book will do. They will give you a higher advance. An advance is basically the amount of money that they give you up front. It's basically you sell your book to them, and that's what they're paying you for it. And it's called an advance because that is an advance check upon what you will be getting as royalties and such. They might give you $5,000, $10,000. You get that up front. You just made that much money off your book. Your book might not sell a single copy. You still made $10,000. Might sell one copy. You just made $10,000 for one book. But that's all you're going to get out of it. If your book does sell well, however much books you would have to sell to make $10,000 in royalties, you're not getting anything from those books because they've already paid you in advance. After it reaches that point, then you will start getting royalties off of the remaining amount of books that you sell. But, if a publisher doesn't feel comfortable would give you a lot of money per advance because you might be a first-time author. You might have a couple books published, but they haven't really sold that much. They're not going to give you as much of advance because they don't think that you can sell enough to cover that. You know, they might offer you just like $500 or something like that. You know, it just depends. Another term is a literary agent. A lot of these publishing houses want you to have an agent represent you. They do not talk to authors directly. They have to have a middleman because a lot of authors don't really know the business side of things. Unlike an agent, the publishing house can talk to the agent, you know, actual business matters, and then the agent can refer it back to you in layman's terms, I guess. And some of these smaller independent presses and houses and such, they don't require an agent, but most of them, the bigger ones and stuff, will require you to have some type of agent represent you. And to get an agent is almost as stressful as trying to get a publishing house to pick you up. You have to query them, which is the next term. You have to send a query letter, which is usually a paragraph or two, you know, kind of introducing yourself, your book, you know, what you think you bring to the table, you know, why they should pick you up, and, you know, instead of not picking you up. And a lot of times they will also ask for a, you know, synopsis, which again is not the blurb of your book. They want a synopsis to see what your book is actually about, and all that kind of detail, so they know what to send off to publisher houses once they, you know, do accept you or something. The next is a press kit or a media kit. I do have one. I don't think I've sent it to anybody. I have not had anybody that actually asked for it, but I do know that there are people that do ask for it, and it is a good idea to actually create one. I could not tell you off the top of my head exactly what all goes into a media kit. And the purpose of this is some ARC reviewers will want to read it, just kind of get more information about you. There's usually also an author bio in the press kit. But when you send it to like radio stations or, you know, little podcasts or news channels that will do interviews of local people, authors and such, you send that to them, and then they can look at the questions you've already wrote down. That way that they don't have to actually try to come up with new questions, especially if you are a new author or something. They might not have read your book. They might not know anything about it. They got that press kit or that media kit. They can kind of look through it. They find out a little bit about you. They can read the blurb of the book. You know, if you got that little sample, they can kind of read through that. It's very short, usually like less than a page or a page or whatever. It's just very kind of compressed. If you have any kind of reviews already, you can put that in there. They kind of see what other people are talking about your book. You have those questions, so when they actually talk to you, they want to kind of like interview you and ask you questions during this little live chat, which usually they do. They already have questions. They don't have to try to come up with stuff about a person or a book that they have no idea what it's about. They've like, oh, okay, you know, blah, 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 blah. Where'd you get the idea for the book? You know, when did you start writing it? How long did it take? You know, if anything in particular that you want to talk about that most people wouldn't typically ask, you know, like where'd you come up with this name or something, you can put that in there, and that way they know, hey, you know, where'd you come up with this name? And that gives you the opportunity to talk. So yeah, they're good ideas. I haven't done any kind of interviews or anything like that. I do have one. None of my ARC reviewers ask for it. A lot of people like that don't. It's usually more for, I think, podcasts and you know, radio interviews and stuff like that. But it is nice to have. And the last one I'm going to talk about are reader magnets. A reader magnet is something to engage with your readers to make them want to read more. Just what it sounds like, a reader magnet. You try and pull in new readers. One way you can do that, I have a newsletter. I know a lot of other people do this with their newsletters. When you first sign up for somebody's newsletter, you can get like a short story or like a small portion of their book or something to read for free just for signing up. Like my newsletter, I have it set up for you to receive the first 2 chapters of The Battle for Metagore when you first sign up for my newsletter. So when somebody new comes around, oh yeah, I'll sign up for the newsletter, get it, boom, you get that for free. And oh, cool. So they can read the first 2 chapters. And I go, oh yeah, this is kind of cool. I like this, you know. Then they can go out and buy it, you know. They're not really obligated to go, well, I don't know if I like it. Why would I want to, you know, spend this kind of money or anything like that to buy a book that I don't really know what's about or anything like that. I've never read anything else from him, especially since that's my only thing else. Like, yeah. But if they have that, they can actually kind of get a taste of the story and my writing style and determine from there, yeah, I'll go ahead and read this. You know, I like it. So then they can go and buy it. So it's just something kind of sucks in readers. Some people don't like doing stuff like that. They would rather do like a short story or something that they wrote. They might write a novel and put it for sale and then put like a short story in as their reader magnet for their newsletter or for, you know, their blogs or whatever. And when people read that and they like that, and then at the end, be like, if you like this short story, you know, be sure to check out my other books or something over on Amazon or something. So it's something to kind of give a small taste of your writing to a potential reader, to try to hook them in to come and actually buy your books and read them. So, yeah. So my camera just died, so I'm finishing it on my phone. Anyways, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever. I don't care. You do you, I do me. I got a bunch of links down below. Got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Patreon account where you can support me for as little as $1 a month. YouTube, obviously. I have a website, a blog on my website. You can sign up to my newsletter, on which, like I said, you can get the first 2 chapters of the Battle for Metagore for free if you do that. And yeah, all the links to my debut novel, The Battle for Metagore, over here, is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all that. All those links are also down below, as well as other author tubers. If you're new to AuthorTube in general and want to find some others, there's some down below. You can go check out their links, and there is a schedule. Don't know how up to date it is, but there is a schedule of other write-ins during the week if you want to try to get some writing done with, you know, some company, chit chat, whatever. That schedule is down below. I typically do mine on Sundays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Go check all that out if you want. I think that's about it. So, yeah. Peace out, Yoli. Everybody love everybody.